first time I laid eyes on Michael, I knew he was the one. It was a serendipitous encounter at a coffee shop. I was standing in line, trying to decide between a latte and an Americano when he flashed me a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Michael," he introduced himself, extending his hand towards me. "Sarah," I replied, shaking his hand. There was an instant connection, a spark that set my heart fluttering. We spent hours talking that day, discovering shared interests and dreams. As we parted ways, he asked me out on a date, and I eagerly accepted. In the weeks that followed, our love bloomed. Each date was more enchanting than the last, and soon we found ourselves inseparable. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, and it wasn't long before he got down on one knee and asked the question I had been waiting for. "Sarah, will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled up in my eyes, and I could hardly contain my excitement. "Yes, Michael, 1,000 times yes," I exclaimed, slipping the ring onto my finger. As we started planning our wedding, I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest woman alive. The day finally arrived, and we stood before our loved ones, pledging our love and commitment to each other. In the reception hall, after the festivities had died down, I stole a moment alone with Michael amidst the twinkle of fairy lights. "I can't believe we're finally married," I said, my voice filled with bliss. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. "You've made me the happiest man alive, Sarah. I promise to love and cherish you for all eternity." His words melted my heart, and I kissed him tenderly. "And I promise the same to you, Michael. Together, we can conquer anything." Little did I know that those words would be put to the test sooner than I imagined. After our honeymoon, Michael suggested we move into his parents' house temporarily until we found our own place. It seemed like a sensible idea at the time, and I didn't want to start our married life with any disagreements. However, the warmth and love that I had experienced during the wedding now seemed to fade in the shadow of the reality I faced in Michael's childhood home. As we settled in, I noticed that his parents didn't seem to have any jobs or means of income. They lived off Michael's earnings, and it wasn't long before I became the one paying for their expenses. One evening, as I was helping in the kitchen, Helen entered, her expression cold and disapproving. "What do you think you're doing here?" she asked sharply, her eyes glaring at me. "I just wanted to help with dinner," I replied, trying to maintain composure. "We don't need your help. This is our house, and you're just a guest here," she snapped back. The sting of her words caught me off guard. I had hoped for acceptance and love from my new family, but it seemed like Helen had a different plan in mind. Later that night, I confided in Michael about the encounter with his mother, hoping he would understand and support me. "Michael, your mother, she doesn't seem to like me very much." He sighed, looking conflicted. "She's just protective of me, Sarah." I nodded, trying to believe his words. But as the days turned into weeks, Helen's cold demeanor towards me only intensified. I felt like an unwelcome intruder in my own home, and it became evident that Michael's loyalty to his parents surpassed his commitment to our marriage. The promise of forever felt like it was slipping away, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. Little did I know that the true test of our love and commitment was yet to come. As days turned into weeks, it became apparent that our stay at Michael's parents' house wasn't just a temporary arrangement. It was unsettling to see how comfortable they were with the idea of us living with them indefinitely, especially without any concrete plans to find our own place. The once grand mansion now felt suffocating, and I longed for the privacy and intimacy that a couple deserved. Michael and I attempted to broach the subject of finding our own home, but his parents always managed to redirect the conversation, asserting that they cherished having their son and his new bride under their roof. Helen's disdain for me became more evident as time passed. She would nitpick at everything I did, from how I folded the laundry to how I set the table. Her criticisms cut deep, and despite my best efforts to win her over, it seemed like I could never do anything right in her eyes. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Helen's sharp tongue was particularly biting. "Sarah, you really don't know how to season the food properly, do you?" she remarked, her tone laced with contempt. "I'm sorry if it's not to your taste," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. Michael chimed in. "Mom, give her a break. It's just dinner." Helen's eyes shot daggers at me before she returned her attention to her son. "You always take her side, Michael. You're blind to her faults." My heart sank, feeling the weight of his mother's words. I had hoped that Michael would stand up for me, but it seemed like he was caught between his love for me and his loyalty to his mother. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself shouldering more financial responsibilities for Michael's parents. They had grown accustomed to relying on him, and it appeared they had no intention of seeking employment or becoming self-sufficient. I tried to discuss this issue with Michael, hoping he would understand the strain it was putting on us, but he was adamant about taking care of his parents. "I can't just abandon them, Sarah," he said, his expression pained. "They've done so much for me, and I owe them." I understand that, Michael, but they need to learn to be independent, I replied, my frustration evident. They're my parents. I can't turn my back on them, he insisted. I felt torn between my desire to have a life with my husband and the knowledge that his parents' dependence on us was dragging us down. My resentment towards Helen grew, not just for the way she treated me, but for the way she manipulated Michael into putting her needs above our marriage. One evening, as I was browsing through rental listings, Michael walked into the room. "What are you doing?" he asked, glancing over my shoulder. "I'm looking for apartments, Michael," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think it's time for us to have our own place." He looked taken aback, his expression conflicted. "But what about my parents? They need me." "And what about us, Michael?" I asked, my voice tinged with sadness. "Don't you think we deserve a place of our own?" He sighed heavily, unable to meet my gaze. "I'll talk to my parents about it, okay? But give me some time." The promise of a resolution offered a glimmer of hope, but as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Michael's loyalty to his parents might outweigh his commitment to our marriage. The troubling move into his childhood home had become a tangled web of emotions, and I couldn't help but wonder if we would ever find our way out. As the days wore on, the tension in the house only grew, and Helen's hostility towards me escalated. It seemed like every action I took was under her watchful, disapproving eye. There were days when I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to navigate her unpredictable moods and outbursts. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, Helen stormed in, her face contorted with anger. "What are you doing in my kitchen?" she snapped, her voice piercing the air. "I'm just making breakfast," I replied, trying to remain calm. "This is my domain, not yours. You have no business here," she sneered. Before I could respond, Michael walked into the room, witnessing the confrontation. "Mom, can you please stop picking on Sarah?" he pleaded, frustration evident in his voice. "I'm not picking on her, Michael. I'm just telling her to stay out of my way," Helen retorted. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm just trying to help, Helen. I don't want to intrude." She glared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Your help is not needed or wanted." Michael stepped between us, trying to mediate. "Let's all calm down." Feeling defeated, I nodded and stepped away, the hurt of rejection gnawing at my heart. It seemed like no matter what I did, I couldn't win Helen's approval. As the days turned into weeks, Helen's mistreatment of me only worsened. She would make snide remarks about my appearance, my cooking, and even my career choices. It was as if she wanted to undermine myself. It's been and drive a wedge between Michael and me. One evening, after enduring yet another tirade from Helen, I sought solace in the living room. Michael sat beside me, seemingly lost in his thoughts. "I can't take this anymore, Michael," I finally spoke up, my voice trembling with emotion. "Your mother's treatment of me is unbearable." He sighed, his eyes heavy with conflict. "She's always been like this, Sarah. I know it's not easy, but she's my mother." "I understand that. But I'm your wife, and I deserve to be treated with respect," I implored. He looked torn between his loyalty to his mother and the love he had for me. "I'll talk to her, okay? I'll try to make her understand." But the conversations with his mother seemed to have little impact. Helen remained unyielding in her disdain for me, and it became increasingly clear that Michael wasn't willing to challenge her or set boundaries. One evening during a family dinner, Helen made another cutting remark about my job, belittling my career choice in front of everyone. Unable to bear the humiliation any longer, I spoke up. "I work hard and I'm proud of what I do," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I won't tolerate being treated this way." Helen scoffed, her eyes narrowing. My heart sank and I felt a rush of anger surge within me. I looked at Michael, hoping he would defend me, but he remained silent, his gaze downcast. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation and betrayal. The promise of forever that once filled my heart with hope now seemed like a distant dream. I knew I couldn't continue living in this toxic environment, but the thought of leaving Michael tore me apart. The unbearable treatment I endured made me question whether our love could withstand the storm brewing within the walls of his childhood home. The constant abuse and emotional turmoil within the house had taken a toll on my spirit. I felt like a stranger in my own home, constantly trying to earn the love and acceptance that should have been freely given. Despite my efforts to mend the rift between Helen and me, her resentment towards me seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the garden, contemplating my next move, an idea struck me. Maybe an extravagant gesture would soften Helen's heart, and we could finally find common ground. With determination in my heart, I decided to buy her an expensive gift for her anniversary, a $10,000 necklace. As the day of the anniversary arrived, I could hardly contain my nerves. I hoped that this gesture of goodwill would pave the way for reconciliation. But deep down, I knew that my heart was yearning for more than just her approval. I longed for a peaceful and loving relationship with my mother-in-law. During the family gathering, I waited for the perfect moment to present the gift. The anticipation in the room was palpable as I handed her the beautifully wrapped box. "Happy anniversary, Helen," I said with a smile. Helen took the box with a raised eyebrow, and for a moment there was a glimmer of surprise in her eyes. But as she unwrapped the necklace and examined it, her expression turned cold. "You call this expensive? This is nothing but a cheap trinket," she said disdainfully, barely acknowledging the effort and thought behind the gift. My heart sank, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I thought you would like it," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Well, I don't," she retorted, setting the box aside with a dismissive flick of her hand. "You don't belong in this family, Sarah. You never will." Her harsh words echoed in the room, leaving me feeling humiliated and defeated. The weight of her rejection was crushing, and I felt a wave of anger and hurt wash over me. I looked to Michael, hoping he would speak up for me, but he remained silent, his gaze averted. Unable to bear the humiliation any longer, I excused myself from the gathering and retreated to the solitude of our bedroom. I felt broken and hopeless, realizing that my efforts to mend our relationship had been in vain. Later that night, I found myself sitting alone, trying to process the events of the day. Michael entered the room, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay, Sarah?" he asked gently, sitting beside me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him. "Your mother's words! They hurt, Michael! I don't know how much more of this I can take." He reached out to hold my hand, but I pulled away, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I thought if I gave her an expensive gift, she might see that I care about her, but nothing I do seems to make a difference. Michael sighed, seeming torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. "I know it's difficult, Sarah, but she's my mother. I can't just cut her out of my life." "I don't want you to cut her out, Michael," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "But I need you to stand up for me, to support me." He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "It's complicated, Sarah. I don't want to upset her." In that moment, I realized that my husband's loyalty was divided, and it broke my heart. I longed for a partner who would stand by my side, who would defend our love against any storm. But it seemed like the promise of forever was fading, and I had to decide whether to continue enduring the unbearable treatment or to find the strength to stand up for myself and seek a life free from toxicity. After the devastating incident with the anniversary gift, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't bear to continue living in a toxic environment where I felt unloved and unsupported. I needed someone who would understand my pain and help me navigate through this ordeal. With a heavy heart, I decided to confide in someone I hoped would offer the support I craved. An old friend of Michael's who owned a company. One evening, as I sat in my rented apartment, I dialed the number I had found in Michael's old contacts. My heart pounded with anxiety as the phone rang on the other end. "Hello," a familiar voice answered. "Hi, this is Sarah. I'm Michael's wife," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Sarah, it's been ages since I heard from you. How have you been?" the friend replied warmly. Despite my trembling voice, I mustered the courage to share my turmoil with her. "I'm not doing well, to be honest. I'm facing some difficulties with Michael's family, and I don't know what to do." She listened attentively as I poured my heart out, explaining the unbearable treatment I had endured and the strain it had put on our marriage. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Sarah. You don't deserve to be treated that way," she said sympathetically. "I'll do whatever I can to help you." Feeling a glimmer of hope, I shared my desperate desire for some form of justice, for a way to find relief from this torment. My friend listened, and after a brief pause, she offered her assistance. "I can't intervene directly, but I do have some influence in Michael's workplace. I'll talk to him and see if there's anything I can do," she promised. Tears of gratitude welled up in my eyes. "Thank you so much. I just need some sort of resolution." With renewed hope, I hung up the phone, feeling like I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life. Little did I know that seeking support would lead to a twist in my path, one that would eventually change the course of our lives. About a month later, I received a phone call from my friend, delivering news that both shocked and troubled me. "Sarah, I talked to Michael, and he wasn't receptive to my suggestions. In fact, he got defensive and angry." I felt a sinking feeling in my heart. "Did he say anything about me reaching out to you?" "He didn't mention it explicitly, but it seemed like he suspected something," she replied cautiously. I knew that Michael's loyalty to his family ran deep, but I couldn't help feeling betrayed by his reaction. Despite my efforts to find a solution, it seemed like I was still facing the same walls of resistance and denial. In a moment of desperation and anger, I decided that if my attempts to seek support and reconciliation were futile, then maybe I needed to take matters into my own hands. The thought of revenge took root in my mind, not to hurt anyone, but to make them understand the pain they had caused me. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside Michael's workplace. My heart was heavy with conflict, but I knew that I had to go through with it. As I approached his colleague and friend, I took a deep breath and began to share my story. "I know you care about Michael, and I need you to know what I've been going through." The colleague listened intently, his expression softening with sympathy. "I had no idea, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I don't want to cause any harm, but I can't keep living like this. I need him to understand consequences of his actions," I said, my voice shaking. My friend's support and understanding offered me a sense of relief, but I knew that the path I was choosing was risky. I had set the wheels in motion for something that would bring change, but I couldn't predict where it would lead us. As I left Michael's workplace, a mix of determination and uncertainty filled my heart. I hoped that my actions would eventually lead to a resolution, but at that moment, I couldn't foresee the chain of events that lay ahead. As the days passed, the consequences of my desperate attempt to seek support and bring attention to my plight began to unfold. My friend's conversation with Michael's colleague had unintended repercussions, leading to a chain of events that I could not have foreseen. One fateful day, Michael received a call from his boss asking him to meet in his office. As he entered the room, he sensed an air of tension that made his heart race. "Michael, please take a seat," his boss said, his tone grave. Michael sat down, his mind racing with worry. "Is there something wrong?" "I'm afraid there is," his boss replied, looking solemn. Michael's eyes widened with surprise. "I don't understand. I've always been dedicated to my job." His boss sighed. "I know, but these reports suggest otherwise. We value our employees' integrity and professionalism, and we can't turn a blind eye to this." Feeling a mix of confusion and frustration, Michael tried to defend himself. "I don't know where these reports are coming from, but they can't be accurate." His boss looked at him with a hint of sympathy. "Michael, I suggest you take some time to reflect on your actions and consider how they might affect your future here." As Michael left his boss's office, he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and bewilderment. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but he couldn't deny the mounting evidence against him. It was then that he realized that my desperate attempt to seek support and bring attention to our situation had backfired, costing him his job. Meanwhile, the chaos in the house grew exponentially. With the loss of Michael's job, he spiraled into a state of depression and began seeking solace in alcohol. The house that was once a picture of luxury and comfort now resembled a scene of disarray and neglect, littered with empty bottles and shattered dreams. His mother, who had relied heavily on him for financial support, now found herself unable to maintain the lifestyle they had grown accustomed to. The reality of their situation began to sink in, and the once proud matriarch was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. One evening, I decided to visit the house, hoping that the turmoil might pave the way for some form of resolution. As I entered the once familiar halls, I was met with a scene of devastation. Michael's mother sat in the living room, her face etched with worry. "What has happened to us, Sarah?" she said, her voice shaky with emotion. "I never thought it would come to this." I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. "I didn't want this either. I just wanted us to find a way to coexist peacefully." She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I know I've treated you terribly, and I'm sorry, but I never thought it would lead to this." As I listened to her words, I realized that beneath the harsh exterior, she too was suffering the consequences of her actions. The power dynamic had shifted, and the tables had turned in a way that none of us could have predicted. "I didn't want this for any of us," I said softly. "I just wanted us to find a way to build a family together." She looked down, her voice barely audible. In that moment, I understood that seeking revenge had not brought me the peace and resolution I had hoped for. It had only perpetuated the cycle of pain and resentment, leaving us all wounded and broken. As I walked through the house, seeing the remnants of the life we had built together, I knew that I had to make a choice. I could continue down the path of revenge and bitterness, or I could choose a different route, one that led to healing and growth. In the end, I made a decision that would change everything. I realized that seeking revenge wouldn't bring me the happiness and peace I craved. Instead, I needed to find a way to break free from the toxic cycle and start anew. I decided to offer a solution that would give us all a chance at a fresh start. I approached Michael's mother and proposed that I buy the house from them, offering a fair price that would ease their financial burden. I also suggested that Michael and I should part ways amicably, acknowledging that our marriage had reached a point of no return. After much resistance, Michael's mother eventually agreed to the proposal. The paperwork was signed, and I became the owner of the house that had once been a symbol of our broken dreams. With a heavy heart, I moved into the house, and Michael and I finalized our divorce. It was a painful chapter to close, but it was also the beginning of a new one. As I stood amidst the walls that now belonged to me, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I had taken control of my life and found the strength to break free from the toxic relationship that had bound me. It was time to embark on a journey of healing and self-discovery to build a peaceful and happy life for myself. With the tables turned, I learned that revenge was not the answer to our troubles. Instead, it was through forgiveness and understanding that we could find the path to redemption and liberation. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to forge ahead, seeking solace in the promise of a better future.